Kia ora everybody. Sitting down with an old rugby mate, Fred, or if you know him a bit more personally, he's Graham actually, but everybody should know him as Fred.
I can't believe you remembered that.
What did you do last weekend, Fred?
Jesus, I can't remember.
It's a big week.
Was I telling you what did I do last weekend?
I don't know.
Do you remember? Is this something you actually you remembered from our discussion last weekend?
No, we were talking Saturday morning, so yeah. I don't
Yeah, no, last weekend was pretty cruisy actually. It's the last quiet weekend I've had. I'm going to have for a little while. We've got lots of sort of some social events. I've got got a gig to go to. I don't often go to gigs, so I'm going to see Florence and the Machine in a couple of weeks, and then I've got a couple of courses coming up. I've got one I'm really excited about. Guy by the name of Logan Gilbrick, who he owns a gym in LA called Juice Gym, and it's called Hold the Standard, and it's for basically business owners, gym business owners, about how they can really get their staff on board with their vision, get the people working really buying into what they do, and how they can leverage that to make it into a proper business, which I think has been something missing in the training, physio, gym world for a long time. It seems to have started off people just wanting to, I love training. I'll just open a gym so I can train with my bros and hopefully make some money from it. And so it's now getting into that space where it's a real legitimate business. And so this guy's leveraged that, and he's put together a good course. So I'm kind of fizzing for that in a couple of weeks' time. So. Yeah, but as I say, last weekend pretty quiet, and quiet enough this weekend, and then going into the first sort of quarter of the year.
Absolutely. When you say sort of hold the standard, is it for the case of New Zealand? It might be raise the standard.
Yeah. There is a bit of there's a bit of a thought process amongst those in the know that New Zealand and to an extent Australia are a couple of years behind where they are in the States, just through I think it's just numbers, and there's so many different choices that comes with a bigger population that people have to give themselves an edge, and with that necessity there comes a lot of innovation around business practices. And I think in New Zealand there are some places that do it really well. I've got to give a shout out to Daz up at CrossFit New Zealand where I work. I'm obviously a bit biased, but there's a big focus there, and with Logan from Juice on investing in the people that work for you, spending a lot of time coaching them, asking a lot from them, but giving them a lot back in the way of training and personal development. And I think that's something that we can really learn from. We need to actually really look at our biggest assets, and I think that's our people around us. That's something I've come to learn certainly over the last couple of years, is invest in your people and your friends. And it doesn't have to be in a business point of view, but you've got to invest time in the people that mean the most to you. And so yeah, we can definitely be raising the standard from that point of view, I think. Yeah.
Mate, we come from the health professional realm. You as a physio, myself as an optometrist, and professional development's one of our key things as a profession. You can't practice unless you've done the time expanding your horizons and expanding your thought processes. Do you think that's really something that the gym and training industry could really push through on it, and obviously help to raise the standard? And it's not just about the gym anymore. It's about a full wellness space. And like in our profession where we have more time, we're in a really privileged position to change people's lives and improve people's lives and have those harder discussions. With a little bit more time, you can delve into actually what's motivating people, why they're making particular choices. And do you think that the gym environment now has moved away from just personal training and helping someone lose a few kgs for a period of time on the scales, to actually having a complete change of lifestyle that optimizes them going forward?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think you're seeing with the people that are coming to the forefront of the training, the coaching world, that is definitely the direction they're going. And you mentioned time and the privilege that we have of time. It's a huge thing, and it's only with that time that we can dig deeper into what makes people tick. And that's something I think is really important, is if you don't actually have that, if you don't have the process behind why people want to lose that few kilos, or why people want to get stronger, I think you're always going to struggle. And personal trainers nowadays, we can't just be someone that counts to 10 anymore. It's not enough these days. So as you say, time is a privilege, but it's got to be used wisely. And that overall health and wellness space is definitely where it's going. And everyone really needs to be on board, because if you're not, someone else is going to be there. And we owe it to ourselves. And you talk about that professional development and personal development. All the information about physio, probably optometry, although that's not my field, personal training, it's out there. It's on the interwebs. It's there for free. And I honestly think that the personal development stuff, that is the stuff that's less easy to come by, because we just don't know what to look for. And that's the stuff that these days is going to get us the results. And it's the stuff that I think we need to be spending our money and our time on, is that personal development side of things for ourselves. And then what that does is it gives us an openness and a vulnerability to share with our clients. And from that, we can dig deeper into what they need. And I think half of the skill these days is working out what the client needs, and helping them to realize that as well.
And just what you said there about a little bit of vulnerability, setting an example that, hey, whilst I'm here helping you, I'm also being helped myself, and I'm also expanding myself. And I'm setting an example for you that, we never have all the answers, but we're on this constant journey of learning and development.
Yeah, definitely. Like we're all out here on our own path, trying to realistically be the best humans that we can be. And I think that forms the basis of, or it should form the basis of everything we do. Is what I've done today, is it something I can be proud of? There's that just reminds me, there's another coach I follow. You'll probably know Carl Powley over from San Francisco. He started off as a gymnastics coach. Awesome. You don't know him, do you?
No.
Started off as a gymnastics coach, but he really used that as a platform to help people become better at life, realistically. And he started this thing, which he started as a bit of fun, but it was called the Be Proud Project. And it's, ask yourself a question with everything that you do. Is this helping me become better? Am I proud of my body of work? So is this something that, I would look back in 10 years time and be proud of doing? I think that's really, really important. I've got sidetracked there. I forgot what you were talking about, what the actual question was. But I think, with everything that we do, you can ask yourself the basic question: will I look back on this and will I be proud of it? And is it something that is going towards helping me be a better human and helping my people and the people around me?
No, that was it. Followed on nicely. Yeah, setting the example, and if you're proud of what you're doing, and then people can see your vision and buy into it, and also you can take them along. Before we delve any deeper, because this is great, who is Fred today? How would you describe yourself in a in-depth way?
How long have you got?
Yeah, go for it.
Look, so as you mentioned, Stag, we met through playing rugby. I was trying to hang on at the end of my career, playing reserve grade footy. I say I was playing. I was on the field, but I really love my code, and I was a bit of a rugby buffet. I had my obviously I was starting my physio career as well, and I was struggling with the idea of transitioning out of playing rugby. I didn't know where my enjoyment was going to come from, because I lived for the Saturday afternoon, and realistically I lived for the golden hour after the game, where you feel like you've earned a couple of beers and enjoyed the social aspect of it. Didn't know where that was going to come from. And then I was lucky enough to sort of fall into CrossFit, where I think everyone did around about that 2012, 2013 time, the golden years of CrossFit, where everyone came in and was looking down their nose at every other form of exercise. But something resonated with me, and I enjoyed it. And I was again lucky enough to meet up with Darren at CrossFit New Zealand, who, for the time and still, I believe, had a very enlightened view exercise is, it's a way of, any form of exercise is better than being on the couch, and that realistically we need to be strong and we need to help our people along the way. So I started coaching with Daz, and that, I guess, started on the journey where I am today, where I'm a physio within the gym. I coach within the gym. But I think the biggest change has come in the last couple of years. We spoke last week, and I mentioned it briefly that my wife and I separated a couple of years back. And yeah, on the face of it, it was a mutual thing. But what I came to realize is that it takes two people for things to go wrong. And so I became quite introspective, and I was looking within myself for a lot. I did a lot of, and I'm still doing psychotherapy and counseling, and that's kind of where this sort of that journey towards trying to become a better human has really come from. What I've come to realize is that over whatever we do, whether we're trying to become a better physio, trying to earn more money, trying to be stronger, be fitter, be able to run further, it's really that we're there trying to be better people. And once you can work out how you want to go about that, you can make the decision, do I bring people along with me? And it actually takes a lot of weight off the shoulders. You realize that the people that are going to come along with you have a similar outlook on life, and they'll come with you, and the other people will naturally fall by the wayside because you're not their person. And when you realize that, it doesn't matter. You don't take it personally. It's just like, that's cool. There are a lot of other people out there, and it takes the weight off, and it gives you a lot of freedom, because you don't have to try hard to get the people alongside you that you want, because it all comes from a good place of just trying to be better. So yeah, I guess it sounds a bit sort of D&M, but it's been a very enjoyable, challenging journey, and a shift from where I was, and from the guy that came over to New Zealand to play a bit of rugby and to be a sports physio. Would never have thought I'd be where I am now, but it's been an enjoyable time, and I'm hoping for it to continue even further.
But you're also a proud Scotsman, despite the slightly English accent. Why did you pick New Zealand? I've got a friend through the farming community that's out in the borderlands at the moment, and I said to him, that could be Southland or Otago, and it's no surprise that place is populated with Irish and Scottish heritage. But what you gave you the idea that, hey, I'm going to immigrate to this place. It's on the other side of the world, and I'm away from my family. I've got to, what Alex and I are finding out, even moving to Australia, where the sort of thinking and the culture is pretty similar, but you find real fast that you miss your tribe, and so why was the choice to immigrate one that drove you, and it's obviously kept you here?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if we spoke about this before, but after I left school back in 2000, I did a year working as a tutor at Dilworth School up in Epsom, and had a fantastic time. And I always had it in my head that I wanted to come back and live in New Zealand as an adult. When you're a tutor, you're 18 years old, you get your board, your food, everything for free, a couple of $100 a week, and the money for a bit of party time. And it was a great time, and I loved the people, loved the country, and thought, I want to come back. And then come 2010, when I moved over here, we're in a situation in the UK where I was in the National Health Service as a physio, and I was getting pushed into areas that I just didn't feel I was ready for. The people that were supporting me were moving on because there was nowhere for them to go from a work perspective. So there was no monetary reason for them to stay in the NHS. So it was a good time to move on. I wanted to work in sports. And I thought, well, New Zealand's as far as you go, and anywhere you go after that is closer to home. And it was honestly, it was going to be a couple of years, and then we'll see if we maybe want to move on somewhere else. It was the first step in the road to where Fred wants to end up living. And then it gets its hooks into you, and you start building a new tribe, and you start having some close friends. And it's interesting. I was saying to someone the other day, I'm not someone that I don't have a lot of close friends, but the friends that I do have, they're very important to me. And you know, the drop of a hat, I'd travel to the other side of the world with them, for whatever reason. And I started to realize that most of those people were now in New Zealand. And so it became easy to stay. And as you've also mentioned, you know, everyone in New Zealand is actually Scottish. Some people you're from Scotland and they're like, oh yeah, I'm Scottish too. You know, so it's almost like me telling you that. It's yeah, but you're not though.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that. I guess over the 8 years I've been here, you're talking about tribes and your people, and I've built that group of people. So I've been very lucky that the people that I've gravitated towards have hung about, and now call them some of my best friends.
That's epic, mate. Going into the physiotherapy realm, what is the sort of real core basis of physiotherapy? How is that treatment? How is it helping to cure somebody? And you're actually the second physio I've had on this podcast, so it's quite good. And I'm planning to interview a chiro and understand the philosophy behind that. You know, because obviously he gets a bit of flack. But physiotherapy, what's the core values behind that, and also how does that synergize a little bit with CrossFit?
Shit. This is so. This would be the sort of thing I'd be asked at university, and I'd have an answer just straight like that. And because physio for me is actually morphed into, you know, treating a joint or a muscle very specifically to, at the basis of everything we do, we need to be able to be stronger.
Yeah.
And so that starts with your classical physiotherapy. People need to be out of pain. Then they need to be able to move their joint or their muscle through its range of movement. Then it needs to be strong within that range of movement. And then it needs to be able to move at speed. And that's still the pathway that I go down. But I use a lot of functional movement, because it's all very well having a knee, for example, that can move through its full range of movement. But can it do that properly when you're doing a squat? Can it do it when you're doing a deadlift? Can it do it when you're sprinting? Can it do it when you're jogging? Can you do it when you're jumping? Can you do it when you're walking side to side? And that's where I see the synergy between physiotherapy and CrossFit. And one of the things that historically physios just haven't been good enough at is that we will get you to a stage where you can move your joint, and in of itself, it's moving well, it's strong, you're pain-free. But then all too often, it'll come back around and you'll try and do your do, or whatever your thing is. And because it's not used to being used alongside other muscles and as a whole body movement, we struggle and we re-injure. So physiotherapy needs to start going further into the realms of movement and functional training. That's something that really that forms the basis of my practice now. I'd say I'm less of a physiotherapist and more of, right, how are we going to get you moving in a way that your body is supposed to move, in order that we don't re-injure and we actually make you stronger and more efficient and more effective. So I try and tell people I'm a movement guy, but I think that's a little bit self-indulgent, because realistically people need a physio to start with. And then once we've got the physio side down, then we can do the education around the injury that you've had is a symptom of a movement dysfunction. So I was that's something that I go with my clientele, is that firstly, you're responsible. Okay, I'll just show you the way, but you've got to go through the door. And secondly, injury is not the cause. Injury is the symptom of a dysfunction. So we need to fix that dysfunction.
So, and then I suppose you also get, you know, the body's a powerful thing, that compensation as well. And the neurofeedback from, hey, my knee, or in my case, my hips sore, so I shorten up that stride, I swing my left side a bit more, I overdevelop this ab, other ankles playing dicky, you know.
Man, and it's so that's something as well that's really in the last couple of years really getting into my practice, is talking about feelings, surprisingly. Is what I think that we're very good again at giving specific isolated exercise, but actually asking someone to, right, what is the thought process behind this exercise? This exercise is supposed to make this muscle feel like it's working. That's great if you're doing a hamstring curl, you'll feel it in your hamstring, but can you feel your hamstring working when you're doing a deadlift or when you're running or sprinting? Because it needs to be able to work then. So you need to know what this feeling is and then be able to transfer it into the more functional stuff that we do every day in day-to-day life. And that comes down to, like you say, the neurophysiology and the neurology of stuff, and getting the brain talking to those injured areas. Because one of the problems is, it's a great thing when we get injured, the brain shuts off all communication with the injured side because it's trying to protect it, doesn't want it to move, and it's trying to get the uninjured side to take all the load. But we need to switch that stuff back on. And so we need to delve down into the neurology of stuff before we can really get into the muscular side and the actual strengthening. And then we need to work out how to get that into a functional place as well.
And that's, that's where the likes of primers are, coming into the field sport realm big time, and even getting people on the day or the day before to go through some complex movement to really get the neuromuscular function firing, so that when they're into this massive autonomous movement in a game, that things work how they should, instead of something being suppressed and, like you say, back on the table with a re-injured joint. Yeah,
absolutely right. I love all those primers stuff, but again, where the physio role is yes, give you the primers and give you the activation work and give you give you all the accessory movement, and then give you the tools to cross that over into the stuff that is important to you. So things like, I love Pilates and exercise and yoga and exercises like that, because you can actually feel specific muscles doing the job that they're supposed to. But sadly, we don't spend our whole life in a down dog position. So we need to be able to use those muscles when we're standing up, walking around. Baby's about to fall out of bed, you've got to run and catch baby, and it's got to become like a quick thing that it's got to become subconscious, unconscious, where you're able to switch those muscles on because your body knows what it's supposed to do in specific situations.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Well, while we're in the sort of neurophysiology realm, on your podcast, you talked about coming into the gym and getting ready, and that you want to actually turn on that sympathetic nervous system. Now, since listening to that, I've slightly changed my warm-up, and my process at the moment is going into the gym, and we've got Daily Stoic there, and I was just sitting down and reading it before going into some static stretch. Well, now I've taken that book onto the Aerodyne and started to get a bit of movement, and then in those stretches be a bit more mobile and move around the joints and things, particularly the hip. Why do we need to switch on? And then you spoke about afterwards going for a walk or a stretch as a group, and then calm back down again, particularly if you're training in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, so like I geek out to an extent here, but your nervous system's got two basic arms to it. It's got what we call the sympathetic nervous system. People will recognize that as your fight or flight type of stuff. So guy Julian Pineau, who's a strength coach and again a movement fundamentalist, he speaks about it's the nervous system you need if you're being chased by a bear. Now, look, these days, hopefully we're not getting chased by bears all the time, but that's the sort of nervous system you need to prime when you are working out. And so if you go into the gym and the first thing you do is roll around on lacrosse balls or rollers, or you have a good old stretch, or you do some breathing drills, or some form of deep breathing drills. Unfortunately, what you're doing is you're targeting the nervous system that takes you the other way, the parasympathetic nervous system, that calms you down. It's called your rest and digest. It takes the blood away from the muscles, in towards the vital organs a bit more. So doing the right work at the right time can actually have a massive impact on what you do. So generally, what we talk about, and you'll have heard in the podcast, is you want to get yourself moving, get the blood flowing, as you say, on the Aerodyne, the ski erg, the rower, go for a bit of a jog, get the blood sort of moving around the muscles that are going to be working, the arms, the legs, and take it away from those vital organs a little bit. And then you want to be doing the movement specific stuff, getting those joints moving, get those joints moving in the fashion they're supposed to be moving in. So if we're going to hit a squat session, then you want to be doing squat-based movements. You want to be doing maybe a flow around your hips, the base around your hips, your ankles, your upper back. And then from there, you can do your accessories, your activation stuff, and then gradually start warming up for the more specific movements. So if you're doing back squats, start warming up your back squats and gradually building load. And now what that does is it primes you for the specific movement, gets the sympathetic nervous system firing up a little bit more. And then after you've finished, that's when you need to take that sort of that walk, maybe a 200-meter walk. Is something we program for all our athletes. As soon as you finish an intense workout, 200-meter walk helps bring the blood away again from the extremities back into the system, stops it pooling within the muscles. And then from there, you're doing more of your stretchy, you're rolling on the lacrosse balls, because that upregulates that parasympathetic nervous system, calms the breathing rate, and just brings you back down to earth, and means that you can go on with your day. But you'll have felt yourself, if you go to the gym and you go straight into a high intensity workout, you get this massive adrenaline dump about halfway through your second wind, if you will. And then if you go away without calming yourself down, you then get this massive, just absolute drop off of energy straight away. So that using the nervous system to help you get up for a workout and then bring yourself down, really, really important.
Yeah, and something that I've found massively beneficial has been getting in the driveway, heading over the road for a swim, and it's a bit woo-woo, but going into a squat on the sand with the sun coming up and getting to that cool water and it moving around and just really taking a few breaths and chance to reflect has been massive, and the day is superb. How amazing is it?
It's awesome. We spend a lot of our time in stressful situations, day-to-day life, young kids, hit targets at work. Then we go to the gym and we try and smash ourselves in the gym. We've got busy lives. We have people that will come to the gym and literally we want to make it the best out of the day, but literally as soon as it's over, they're away because they've got to get back to work. Some of the things that we preach is just, look, even if you've got 2 minutes in the car, just 2 minutes of just taking some deep breathing. It's not the most ideal, but it's something just to try and bring yourself down. And gosh, if you can go to the beach, sit, do a bit of a squat in the water and that sort of thing, and just take some breaths and look at the cool sunsets and the pretty colors and all that sort of stuff, and just appreciate that. That's going to be amazing at just either starting or finishing your day nicely, and just trying to take some stress out of your life. Because we're, with the advent of all these smartphones and interwebs and social media, there's a lot of stress in our lives, and we need to take any time to try and downregulate that a little bit.
And talk about that sympathetic nervous system's primed for beers, but it's still a primitive thing. If you go back to the water boy, the amygdala oblongata, and it doesn't quite know the difference between a beer and what your pituitary and adrenals are doing with a deadline or a screaming child, or and the same, a child crying in modern day might not be the same as it's being jacked by a jackal or something like that.
Yeah, but your amygdala oblongata, it's a primitive thing. It doesn't go on thought process. It goes purely on instinct. So yeah, like you say, it doesn't know the difference between you being chased by a bear or the screaming child at 3 a.m. When you've got a work deadline to hit or a work meeting to hit in 4 hours time. It doesn't know that sort of stuff. All it knows is that it's got to release all your stress hormones because you're in a stressful sympathetic state.
Yeah, mate. Something I've sort of been challenging with, and I've now been doing CrossFit for coming on 8 months, and that's the sort of programming around it. So like yesterday we did Christine, and that involved a row and then a deadlift and then a box jump 3 times over. And at the end of it, I was so surprised that the biggest thing that hurt was my forearms. And that was because I was exhausted of then going into this deadlift. And when you've exhausted your hamstrings and your bum and your back, and then you're trying to lift and you just try to hang on. How do you think that sort of what is the challenge with CrossFit in that you might be using the wrong muscle groups or messing up the neuromuscular patterns or overtraining something? I don't know. It's something that I'm battling with. I'm enjoying it and I'm loving the challenge, but then I'm also like, what does this do into my movements? What is the sort of philosophy that you'd sort of counter that?
Yeah, I see. I see where your problem is there. I think one thing to be aware of is that when you go to one CrossFit gym, it's going to be very different to another CrossFit gym. And so what you're describing there from a training point of view is you're hitting your posterior chain in 3 different, very aggressive movements. You've got a slower deadlift, which will no doubt be fairly heavy. You've got a row, which should be, again, posterior chain based, using your hips. A lot of people tend to go towards their quads a little bit, but there is a grip factor there. And then you've got an explosive box jump movement. When you're tired from rowing and deadlifts, it's difficult. And there's a similar upper body workout. I want to say it's called Justin or Justine or something like that. But it's basically 21-59 of handstand push-ups, and ring dips. So it's hitting all of your pushing muscles. And there's definitely a place for that sort of workout, although I'm not a massive fan. But that's the sort of thing that, in my opinion, it's a testing workout. What would call a testing workout? And so that sort of thing should take up about 5% of your training time. Yeah. So you'd maybe get one of those workouts in every 20. The rest of the time, the 70% of the time, 70 to 80% of the time, really is what we would call a training workout, where there might be a bit of intensity within the workout, but you should never be at that 100% testing workout for about 80% of your workouts. So you've got to take that into account. And then the final one, that sort of 10 to 15%, is a bit of tenacity. That might be your longer ones. We had a tenacity workout. We had a suitcase carry at 32 kilos for a 1 mile suitcase carry, 32 kilos. That's a bit of tenacity one. It's sort of a 16-minute. How long can you hold on for? How long can you grip for? What's your midline doing? What are your traps doing? And having to get rid of that negative self-talk. We've had a couple of those. We had a 5K run the other day.
Yeah, we did row before Christmas, and it was good but bad.
And look, the thing that you got to talk. It's the self-talk there, isn't it? It's not so much the doing of it. It's how hard can you push yourself in something that is an aerobic piece or is a challenging piece on your grip. And it's getting rid of that negative self-talk. So that's the tenacity side of things. So I think if your training program is split into about 70 to 80% of training, where you're focusing on the quality of your movement, you're focusing on varied movements, always move well before adding load. And then you've got 20% of that tenacity stuff, a longer aerobic metcon with multiple movements, or just something like a heavy carry for a long time. And then that final sort of 5 to 10% is your testing. But if you're constantly, and I've seen gyms like this, and people love it because they're making the fat cry and they're making their eyeballs bleed. And, that's what really, if you're being honest, that's what got us into CrossFit.
Yeah.
And people love those workouts, but there's no longevity in it because we just can't push our bodies like that. So if you're going to work out, and you realize after 3 weeks that every single workout is 20 to 30 minutes of smashing yourself and you're just fucking miserable, you need to ask yourself the question, is this the right place for me? And so I like that analogy of the 3 T's, the training, testing, and tenacity, and splitting it into those sort of 60% or 70%, 5%, and 15 to 20% of all 3, and looking at your training that way. I've got to shout out Darren Ellis for that. I think he's coined that. He's calling it triple threat or something like that. So the 3 T's. There you go. Daz at CrossFit New Zealand.
Absolutely. That circles us back to holding the standard or raising the standard, and it's really the key to a good box. And that's where I think I'm lucky. As I said, 8 months in, and I've gone from 3 days a week to 5 days a week, and feeling superb. And we do really good job of monitoring where things are at. They get body impedance in every 3 months. There's physios and nutritionists on board. You know, it's like you guys are working with. There's a lot to it, and you know, we've got a guy that's into Olympic lifting, or a few coaches into Olympic lifting, a couple into powerlifting. They're doing a gymnastics tutorial today. At one of our head coaches was pretty high up in college gymnastics, and it's a really fantastic place. And like I said, programming is the key. And if you're not feeling it, there may be something up with the programming.
Yeah. And look, there's plenty of places that you can go. You know, the obvious one at the moment is that F45. If that's the sort of thing you like, that sort of high intensity, you know, being out of breath the whole time, sort of stuff, there's definitely a place for it. And there's places you can go, but certainly if that's all that you're wanting from your training, I don't know if say CrossFit New Zealand would be for you, because really our job is to persuade you that that's what you need with your training. You know, it's and that's a difficult step, I think. And there are places where you can go and you can get out of breath and you can feel like you had a fantastic workout. My question would really be, how long does that last for? That, you know, 45 minutes of smashing yourself. And that's the difference. Sounds like you've got a great place as well, with different coaches, and it's a culture that you build around that place. And the reason your place will have been like that is because you've attracted the clients that want, you know, they want that variety, they want that type of investment in the coaching, and that's really important that you build that culture around that. And that culture is what builds the gym, and that's what continues to grow it, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about that mindset of wanting to, you know, bleed, make your fat bleed by sweating lots and being out of breath and eyeballs bleeding. When I was planning in Christchurch, I was with one of the strength and conditioning coaches there, and he was working with the tactics, and that was something that he really struggled with some of the netballers there, is that and I guess one of the pressures as well was body image, especially in a sport like netball. You know, you're out there on TV and you've got to look good as well. And trying to program and communicate that, hey, you're in a sport that's ballistic, that's jumping, that's fast. You know, we need to bulletproof these joints. We need to make you able to recruit things. And today we're actually going to program in something that's one lift every, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and you're not going to be puffed, and or we're going to go through this series and prime into our training, and you know, they want to run around and do a high intensity interval for 20 minutes, and it's like this is the long term. We're here to play netball, and these are the things that are going to make us better. You said Darren's a great coach. What do you think is really important about changing this paradigm that, you know, it's calories in, calories out? We've got to burn a certain amount today so that we can, you know, be our image. What do you think that?
Look, mate, we're drops in the ocean here. We are told day in, day out about the 6-week blitz, the 6-week body blitz, or the 8-week 6-pack, or get your summer body in 3 months, or whatever it is. And it's out there, it's in front of our face, every single magazine, every single advert that comes up. And it's difficult, man. It's so hard to change that. We're getting there. And look, if you think we struggle here, I was just in the States for a month or so, and it's even worse there. There's just sugar everywhere, and people are just they're resigned to it. And so I think we just have to, we know what we're doing is right. We're on the right path. And we have to keep doing what we're doing, and doing it with an absolute belief that we're doing. And it's interesting what you said about the netball girls. Was it club netball or was it professional?
tactics. Yeah, so
I was the tactics, right? Yeah, okay. So it was really interesting to see that happens in the professional ranks. I'm not sure if you knew, I did the S&C for a year with Varsity a couple of years back, and I came across the same thing with the coaches, and we wanted to improve different energy systems at different times. So some of that training would be, right, we're going to do a real intense 3 minutes of work, and then you're going to rest for 10 minutes. And then we're going to do another 3 minutes, and you're going to rest for 10 minutes. So you can hit this energy system at an absolute maximum. And boys couldn't get their head around it. Coaches couldn't get their head around it. Why are you standing around for 10 minutes? And I'm like, well, we're not just trying to run until you spew, because that doesn't help you. But sadly, at that sort of amateur level, that's actually what will win you a championship, being able to run and run and run and run. And there's no real thought to the longevity of the athlete. We want the fittest team out there, because if we've got the fittest team out there, we'll be fittest. And fitness, the definition of fitness is how long you can run for. It's not how long can you run for effectively, or how long can you run with your body above, with your heart rate above a certain level, or what's your ability to pack down and be in a scrum for 10 seconds with an absolute maximum output, and then get up and be on the other side of the field within another 3 seconds. And there's not that thought process. It's just run and run and run. And sadly, at the amateur level, it's just, that is what wins you stuff, because no one else has gone to that place of training the different energy systems, bulletproofing your joints, teaching you about how to get into the best body position, learning how to feel what muscles should do when they're working correctly. No one's gone there for long enough. And the only people really that do it, I think, are the All Blacks. Nick Girl is an amazing guy with his S&C stuff. But at the amateur level, it's just not trickled down enough. And there's still that thought that the further you run, the fitter you'll get. And sadly, because players move around and move on so much, you don't get a team together for long enough to see that difference over 2, 3, 4 years. So sadly, the S&C stuff I did, it wasn't as successful, because to an extent, I didn't do a good enough job of getting people to buy into it, and also it wasn't what they wanted, and possibly for the level of rugby they were at, to what they needed. They did need, to an extent, to be doing hill sprints and run till you spew and get that mental stuff out of the way. So it's a challenge, but we just need to keep plugging away and getting the word out. Podcasts like this, just doing your stuff and committing to your process is enough. And when enough people see that passion, it'll become a tidal wave. But it's time. It just takes time, and that real commitment to the process of it, I think. And that's another thing. Sorry, I'm rambling here. I just thought another thing is that that whole commitment to your process is so important, because the process really is what matters. If you have these constant goals, that's awesome. But what happens now? How do I actually feel about this goal? Why? What's the emotion that I'm attaching to the goal? If it's just that I want to get down to 100 kilos, oh fuck, who cares? Realistically. It's why you want to get down, and how does that make you feel, and what happens then when you've got there? What's driving you to continue there? Because if you've got nothing else, well, how long is that going to last? So yeah, that commitment to the process, and it has to start. We have to be the example setters. We have to have a real belief in what we're doing, and just plug away. And when people want to listen, they'll listen, and they have to be ready for it themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about how you see it at the All Blacks level, and it doesn't trickle down. I've just finished reading Legacy, which is about the All Blacks, and it's about learning and
great book.
Trying new things, and the All Blacks do things, and same with England rugby and South Africa. They do things like sports vision. They have nutritionists. The All Blacks, through Nick Gill and his associations with Grant Schofield, they're doing a lower carbohydrate, high protein sort of approach. The more this whole food approach. There's all these things, but then you see it trickle down, or when they're set free from the All Blacks environment, you see them endorsing things like McDonald's and KFC. You're like, well, where does that line? then you get to the amateur level, and and you say it just becomes an issue of low hanging fruit, and it's been a shock coming to Australia and outside of the Shoot Shield in Sydney and even the Queensland competition. I think they hold things to a semi-professional level, but where we're playing out here, it's about can we throw a ball into a line out? Can we actually do a scrum? Can we get 3 front rowers? And let alone what's the position we should be in? Where should we run next? And then what should we be doing 3 phases down the line? That just doesn't even come into it. And can you even survive a game? And it just goes back to maybe we need to run. Maybe we need to pass the ball.
Yeah. It is interesting how that stuff doesn't trickle down so quickly. One of the things that it happens with professional sports teams all over the world, but just grinds my absolute gears. Guys like Nick Gill, they're high fat, high protein, low carbs. That's pretty well known in this world these days. But yet you've got the All Blacks telling everyone that the way they fuel themselves is on Gatorade or Powerade or whatever it is. And and the up and goes is the same protein as Wheat Bix and milk, and you're like, but can you not see it's because of the milk?
Yeah.
And just stuff like that. And I know there's money involved, and but I find that very, very challenging that they're not practicing what they preach, or they're practicing better than they preach. And you get it on the kids, I call them the kids, but the professional social media, that they're loving going to KFC and McDonald's when they're out of game time. And sadly, although they don't want it, what comes along with being an All Black or being a professional rugby player is a responsibility to the young kids, because you see these young kids walking around GI where they can get a bottle of Gatorade for cheaper than a bottle of water.
Yeah.
And those are the people that we have to target, and their parents and that sort of stuff. And sadly, the All Blacks, I shouldn't hold them up like this, but there's other teams as well that they don't. I think more can be done around that sort of healthcare side of things.
Yeah, and you say cheaper than a bottle of water, but the reality of it is that water, especially in New Zealand, is free. And then going back a sec to the up and go, the protein comes from the milk, but actually what's in an up and go is soy milk, and it's quite possibly doing you more harm than good as well. So you start going down rabbit holes.
yeah, absolutely. And what one of the things that we talk about in our group of coaches is that all this stuff sounds like massive change, and it is. If you go from where we are now to where we would ideally like to be, they're light years apart, and that doesn't just happen. And what we realize is that we've got to go for the low hanging fruit. We've got to go for, all right, instead of a Powerade, have some water, and that's your job for the first year, and then something else for the next year that's just completely doable. 1 sugar in your coffee instead of 2, just something like that. And just, you take time, and eventually over the years and years and years, that education, people will start to see it. But you can't just change everything all at once, because it comes far too overwhelming, I think.
And I think, that's where people like Charles Pollock, when, he's no longer with us, and gets a lot of criticisms around, but, he just starts off with simple things like take some fish oil, and people might argue that he was selling fish oil, but hey, and have a lemon and apple cider vinegar with a pinch of salt in the morning, and go from there. There's your Powerade. Yeah, simple stuff to just start to change your mindset and move on. Yeah. With physio, did you feel like New Zealand and the UK were on par, or what did you?
Look, it's very different because my roles were very different. So when I started in the UK, I worked very much in the National Health Service. So to get a physio appointment in the National Health Service, unless there was an emergency, it was you needed rehab after surgery or something along those sorts of lines. It was generally, where I worked, a 4-month waiting list.
Shit.
So I had either people came in and they were pretty much healed, or they came in and they were in so much pain because they'd had a lot of sort of psychosomatic issues because of the 4 months of being in pain.
Yeah.
And so it was a very different situation, and as well because I worked in the NHS. Our number one priority was to get the waiting list down. So it was basically take your hands off people, give them some exercises to do, come back and see me in a month. And we had 20-minute appointments, and we were just going dawn to dusk, just ramming people through. We couldn't spend time with them, and that was just the necessity of how it was, sadly. And unfortunately, you couldn't sit down and talk about a different model, because the people with the bottom line, all they wanted to see was results straight away in the bottom line. And if you go with the whole, well, what about if I spend an hour with a client and really get him to drill down into what he's doing, maybe that, 2 1-hour appointments would be better than 12 20-minute appointments. But because they don't see that bottom line of someone getting off the waiting list as quickly as possible, you couldn't do that. There was no proof of that. That was all very anecdotal, and I wasn't experienced enough to know about that stuff at the time. I was a very young physio at the time. Whereas come over here, I started off in a lot more sporting environment. Again, we had the shorter appointment times, and it was a case of get them back on the field as quickly as you possibly can. So that was tissue work, taping, some form of exercise, but it was all very localized exercise around the hamstring or the shoulder or whatever it was. And we were just tied to timelines. We had to, communicate with coaches about how long stuff was. So that was very different from that perspective. Whereas now I've got the luxury of, it takes how long it takes, and you stay with me until I am happy and you are happy that you're moving effectively and you're stronger than you were before. And that's, I don't think, a difference between the UK and New Zealand. I think that's just a difference in how I've decided I'm going to run my practice. And, it's a privilege that I can work for myself. Darren's given me an awesome opportunity to do that. But it's just, that is how I've decided to take it, through learning what I've learned from experience. I know that the longer you spend with people and the deeper you can get into their mindset and psyche, and teach them and get them to buy into the fact that what they do is more important than what I do, that's the way to go. And that takes time. It takes time. It takes them coming around to that mindset, and buying into your philosophy. And so that's kind of where I've gone with my treatment. So as I say, I don't know. I think that's probably different to a lot of practices, but I don't think it's specifically a difference between New Zealand and the UK. I think that's just where I've decided to take my work.
It's definitely something I've noticed coming from New Zealand to Australia. A fully private industry that's either driven by a corporate model of putting people into glasses and trying to have that the most available as they possibly can, or a opposite model, which is about the service, the time, the set of skills, the relationship, the treatment, what we can do further, the support we can have with higher professionals. That's the model that seems to succeed in an independent practice. And then you come to Australia, which is, not to the same scale as the NHS, but again, it's on that Medicare. What can we code for? Where can we get people back? And it just becomes, what are we actually doing? Are we trying to compete with the corporate and sell stuff? Are we trying to be an individual trying to be patient-centered, or are we just in a steady state of survival? And is that with the UK and an NHS model? Is it something that you start to see people go out on their own and start to follow their passion and really niche out on an area and do well, or is the mindset in the UK that everything's free, and so if I've got something wrong, I'll just wait? There is, and there is that with the NHS. It's and a lot of people
they couldn't afford a physiotherapy appointment, so they had to wait for the NHS. And the people that were privileged enough to be able to afford them, they would go and see a private physio, because you wouldn't. Why would you wait for 4 months if you can afford it? I don't know. At the time that I was in the UK, there was really, everyone talked about being patient-centered and that sort of stuff, and we talk about it, but as physios, I just don't know if people really believed it. If I'm honest, from what I saw. And, at that time, it was a very sort of narrow snapshot that I had I didn't really work in the UK for a huge amount of time as a physio. So it was a very narrow snapshot. And the people that did succeed actually were the people that I knew that succeeded, were the people who had worked with sports teams and high profile sports teams, and then leveraged a private practice off of the back of that. Certainly in Edinburgh. There are now some more guys, I think, with the advent of social media, that are more out and about and being able to do the private stuff more effectively. And a friend of mine from my local rugby club where I grew up, he's actually doing really well in and around my hometown. But one of the things that he's done is he's brought in stuff that physios have never used to be able to do, like ultrasound imaging for injuries and that sort of stuff. So in the UK, physios can now do ultrasound imaging with physios, and I think he can possibly do some ultrasound guided steroid injections and those sorts of things. So he's gone kind of down that route a little bit. So usually what I saw before is that there's leverage off sports teams or being known through different circles, and then you leverage that into the private practice. But nowadays, with as I say, the advent of social media and being a lot of noise out there, maybe it's become easier in a different way to do that stuff. But there are certainly some very successful good practices that I know of in the UK now, but as I say, my experience is pretty limited over there. I can only really speak to over here.
With the advent of social media, you see people like Kelly Starrett leveraging, I guess, off the likes of CrossFit, and I guess it creates a sort of a funnel approach, and sort of it becomes a sort of self-professing expert or something like that. How well do you think that translates into, you're reaching a large number of people with your knowledge, and that's kind of why I started a podcast, is to try and share some of the things I've learned and impact more people. But then when it comes back to the physio, do you think it then translates into a bigger motivation, or do you think that classifying yourself as a guru might mean that people, that whole thing of expectations don't quite get met? Because
it's interesting you use Kelly as an example. So while I was in the States, I actually met up with him. I'd emailed him, said, look, followed your stuff, I'm a bit of a fanboy, chance of a coffee. And realized that the time that I was going to be there was Thanksgiving. So I followed it up with, just realized it's Thanksgiving, you'll be a bit busy with family, don't worry about it. And he emailed me back and he was like, oh, well, why don't you just come to Thanksgiving if you're going to be on your own? I joined them for Thanksgiving dinner. This is a guy he doesn't know from Adam. So and so using that specific example, Kelly, you see these people, these gurus out there, and you're like, geez, I hope they're like that in real life. He is that and more. And that he's just, that boyish enthusiasm that he has that comes across on the videos, is that he's like that in real life. And he has such a passion for what he does. He's not doing it to be a guru. He's doing it because his passion is to get people moving, to do, similar stuff. Well, what we're doing, but he obviously has a bigger voice, but it's exactly the same. Is we want people to be better humans, and the basis of it comes down to being better. And he has that absolute boyish enthusiasm. So I think that stuff comes through. And so what you see generally on the social media and on the videos, that tends to be that sort of their personality is coming through. And I say it tends to be, look, that's the one example I've got, but it was very awesome to see that, a particular hero is as excited about what he's doing in real life as he is on the videos. So I like to think that crosses over into with other self-proclaimed gurus. I really hope that's the case. And, you know, obviously when we become gurus, mate, hopefully it'll be the same as that.
No, absolutely. So while we're going on that, you guys have started a podcast. What can people sort of expect from your self-proclaimed guruism?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Joe Rogan had better watch out, because I think we had 20 people listen to it last week. So Joe Rogan, watch out for yourself, mate. We started it. We put it out there publicly, but it started off as something, just another resource for the members at the gym. There's three of us coaches. There's Darren Ellis, Imtiaz Desai, and myself. And really what we're doing is unpacking stuff that happens in a CrossFit class and ways to attack different elements of a CrossFit class. So the one you listened to last week was about, you know, ways to warm up and cool down dependent on the time you've got. One we've just recorded is on best ways to kind of pace yourself through workouts depending on what energy system you're trying to hit up, and what the intent of a workout is, really using that to define how you optimize your movements or your exercises. So discussing around that. First one was, you know, if you've got an injury, how do you maintain training? Because we all know that you have to move when you're injured. You can't just sit on the couch for 6 weeks and just hope to come back and be better. So we're trying to unpack different elements that people may struggle with, we had some ideas of what to call it. Someone suggested calling it Unpacked, which I quite like the idea of. We've gone with human mechanics. We like the analogy of you know, helping people to move, and, you know, being the people behind the people, I guess. So that's what we've gone with. And yeah, the idea is just to unpack a little bit around what happens in a CrossFit class, because they can be quite intimidating places. So that's the idea behind it. Yeah.
When you speak about intimidation, what can people expect when they want to get introduced to your CrossFit gym? For example, for me, we had a sit down. I sat down with the owner. We heard about. He told me about his own personal journey. He told me about the philosophy of CrossFit. He told me about the philosophy of the box itself, and what the community is like, what they enjoy doing, where they're sort of at in terms of their way of thinking. And he asked me plenty about what I'm into, what I'm passionate about, which I think is one of the most important questions out there. And you've been touched on already. You know, what makes you do what you do? And then we had some. You know, he went through all the movements, looked at, you know, areas of restriction, and being a rugby player, that's heavily in the shoulders and the upper back, and obviously having that hip surgery through the hips and ankles don't go too well either. But and he introduced me to a number of things that I can be working on to help improve that. And then very much for the first period of time, the coaching was always checking in throughout the class. And there was also obviously the options of doing further personal training before you get into a class. What can people expect in your box?
Mate, that sounds an awesome intro. So, and very similar to what we do here. So, what'll happen is people will quite often call up and ask for a free trial, which I think is fairly normal around a lot of CrossFit gyms. So, what happens? Our free trial consists of the person will come in and they will watch a class, and they'll watch a class with Darren, who's the owner of the gym. And Darren will basically go through and discuss with the client everything that you just mentioned. And that will be and so the client can see what goes on in the class, what goes on in our classes specifically, because you'll know yourself, there's different CrossFit gyms, and different gyms do things very differently. So they'll have a chat with Daz, and they'll go away, and then there'll be a follow-up email. And what then happens is, if the person's keen to join, and they're completely new to CrossFit, they have between 6 and 12 personal training sessions that they have to sign up for. and they're paid for as well. So it's not going to be part of your first month's membership. That's an investment that you make in yourself, which I think makes the first month and that's we hope to get those done over 2 to 3 weeks. So you've got first 2 weeks, but what that does is it makes the first month of training, I think, about $500.
Oh,
so it's quite a big barrier to entry. But what we found is that we have fewer tire kickers. We have people who really do want to make a change in their life. And whilst we might have fewer initial signups, we have almost 100% retention rate from that. So, and those personal training sessions probably speak to what you spoke about before. We do an assessment on movement. So sometimes I'll do that, or Darren will do that, on any restrictions people have, anything that they can't do through long-term injury. And usually that's very early, and that will determine how many personal training sessions we need, depending on training age and movement ability. And then we go through all of the movements that you will encounter in CrossFit. And only once you're able to complete those movements comfortably, safely, and you feel good doing them, are you then going to join the class. Okay. And if you want to carry on, there's the option, as you said, of more personal training until you're completely comfortable joining the class. But one of the things that we had found is that we tried the 2 week on ramps that people get, where they get 6 group classes with new members, and you can't do the individual justice with that, because you've got too many new people trying to learn new stuff. So you can't do the individual justice. And what actually then happens is that you get 6 or 7 new people then flooding into the classes, and people who've been members for 8 to 10 years are now not getting attention, because the new people who've only just joined are needing to be, all the time's needing to be spent with them. So, we still, whilst, we were always looking for new members, we have a massive responsibility to the people that have been our OG. And have spent time, because they're still there to be coached. They're paying an awful lot of money every month for us to teach them. So whilst, yes, we want new members who are going to be a great part of the community, and we can't have that taking away from the people that have been part of the community for an awful long time. So there's a big barrier to entry, but you learn an awful lot from it. You develop an awful lot from it, and it buys you into the culture that we want to propagate through the community.
Mate, that's awesome, and it's staying true to the core values of the gym, and means that it really identifies and self-selects those who want to buy in. You spoke there about training age, and that's something that going back to that Christine, when it comes to deadlifts, when it was a bodyweight deadlift, my training age for deadlifts is large, but my training age for a kipping ball up or a muscle up is 4 days or so, mucking around, seeing it on a CrossFit video. Oh, how do you do that? I'll have a go. Oh, I sort of did it. We'll forget about that. What do you think is really great about the scalability of heaps of the movements, and the fact that, I don't know about your gym, but in our gym, we've got mothers, we've got middle-aged people, we've got elderly people, we've got a group of masters, down to, I think, 14-year-olds and things like that, who are just starting out their training age. What do you think is really great about when you're actually in the class? It's not about those benchmark workouts or hero workouts. It's actually about training and bettering yourself.
Yeah, scaling, I mean, again, the wording we try and use, our place tries to use, is that optimization, because what we know is that intensity is relative, and it's relative to the person. So you talk about mums versus Rich Froning. We want Rich Froning to get the exact same workout as your mum who is 6 months postpartum. And to do that, you need to optimize some of the movements. So, what we might have with Rich Froning is that he's doing 50 toes to bar, but to get the same stimulus, we could have the mum doing 20 slam balls, and that she's going to get the same stimulus out of that. And she's going to be out of breath, just as Rich Froning will be taxed doing 50 toes to bar. Well, he probably won't be, actually. I maybe find something else for him, but that's what the optimization does for you. You always have to look back at the intent of the workout. And if if you'd said to the mum 6 months after, oh, our workout is 50 toes to bar, Rich has done that in under 3 minutes, and she is looking at the bar for 3 hours, and she maybe does one every 2 minutes because she's never done it before, and she's God knows what she's doing to her body. And we're looking at that intensity, and so that optimization that allows you to get the intensity that we desire for you specifically, and that's really, really important. Is workouts, they differ not by design so much, but they differ through that scalability or optimization, so that the intent is the same for everyone.
No, it's something that I didn't really realize so much about CrossFit, and it's been a really enlightening take on it, and also it's helped shift my own mindset. I don't know, rugby boy or having been in sort of semi-elite level training, you always thought that you could do the high level stuff, and it's humbling to go do something that's sort of new to you and outside of your training age and build way up. And I think it's a really good technique in terms of building confidence. Like you say, you can get through a workout has the same intensity and you feel the same burnout and you're part of the class still. It's really awesome.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. We all struggled with that, mate. We're all big buff heads, and we could lift a lot of weight and it looked ugly as sin. And you come into a CrossFit class and there's someone half your size just chucking these weights over their head, and it's you all feel that humbleness and that sort of that ego and your ego being absolutely crushed. And that's an important part of our development and journey. And if you don't feel that, then we need to probably have a chat. So it's an important part. And similarly, we need to go through it. We need to realize that we're not, there's always somewhere for us to go. We're not the athlete that we think we are, and if we are, or if we do think that, then we're not testing ourselves. We're becoming too compartmentalized and not rounded enough.
No, I think it's been one of the biggest feedbacks. And I tried to learn surfing before we moved over here as well, and it was equally as humbling. Beginner mindset, there's something to it. It makes you test, and it's also why I love trying to get into hunting, because right now I'm very, very much a beginner. I walk around in the bush and try not to get lost instead of actually hunting an animal.
Yeah. That's your process. That's awesome.
Yeah. Mate, where do people find the podcast? Where do people find you, the RX movement? Shout it out, and I'll also include it in the notes.
Yeah. So on the socials, probably the RX movement on Facebook. I'm probably most active on Instagram. To be honest, on Instagram, I tend to do a daily post. It's not particularly physio or training based. It's more around finding your process, being a good human. Trying to find my voice a little bit in the social media world. There's a lot of excellent, eloquent people. You spoke with Kelly Starrett, out there talking a good lot of stuff about mobility. And so I'm just been trying to find my voice around social media, and I'm going down a little bit more of the, I guess, mental health, finding your process, finding your place in the world type of line. And that's been a big developer for me. So at the RX Movement is my Instagram handle, and RX Movement Facebook page, and your regular email is fred@rxmovement.com. So those are probably the best ways to get in touch with me. The podcast that we do is called The Human Mechanics. I think from what Daz tells me, it's available on iTunes and Spotify. That sounds very impressive and very important. But yeah, see if we can get those numbers bumped up. And also, if people have got topics that they want us to discuss or chat about, just flick us through a DM, or what do they call it? What do the kids say now? Slide into my DMs?
Yeah, something like that. Anyway. Yeah. I'm no longer a kid either, Fred. So
yeah, no, when you got a 3 at the front of your age. Well,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, cool.
Mate, so what right now is driving your philosophy? What's something that you can leave us with, or ask even about, that people can slide into DMs with an answer, perhaps?
my philosophy at the moment is that whatever we do in our life is really just a vehicle for being a better person, or trying to be a better person. You know, that intent for me is very, very important. If what you do comes from a place of love, comes from a place of trying to help your people, then whether or not you get it right, you can't argue with that shit. It's just, you are doing your best for your people, for yourself. And for me, physiotherapy, CrossFit coaching, whatever I do on my social media, that's a vehicle for that. It doesn't really matter. It could be whatever you like. I could be a gardener. I could be a financial analyst, but my intent is to be the best version of myself that I can be, and for my people to help my people out. So yeah, intent is everything, I think.
Yeah, no, I love it, mate. And one of my favorite podcasts from last year, and that's where that question of what is your passion comes from, is CFNZ, and that's what we started off with. It was the start of the New Year's, and what was your intent with the year? And he had a big year, and I'm sure you this year are going to have a big year. You're leading from intent, and you know, the fruits of that are always going to come out in the positive, I'm sure.
Yeah, appreciate it, mate. Thank you. I'm buzzing for this year, actually. Looking forward to it. It's going to be good.
Awesome, mate. So hopefully after this, those I don't know, I think there's 200 people out there that like this. They'll nice. Be jumping over to you guys. And I've got a guest podcast coming up, and that was one of the questions, you know, what's something that you would recommend to people to not do, and that's compare yourself to Joe Rogan, because it's quite disheartening when your 20 friends tune in and that's all.
No, I know what you mean, and I think if you get caught up in how many people listen and how many followers you've got and that sort of stuff, you can choose to be disheartened, or you can choose to go, shit, this is part of my process. A lot of the reason I do this is for myself. It gives me a discipline, and I've been so impressed with you doing you're up to 60 now, and just the regularity of it is pretty awesome. So you're doing it for your process, and that is the most important thing. And the other stuff, if it comes, it comes. But if not, you've had a good time and you're doing some great stuff and speaking to some great people.
Absolutely, it is. It's both equally. Living my vision of improving people's lives and being a little bit selfish and getting to talk to amazing people such as yourself.
Yeah. Obviously myself, the highlight of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. It's good. Yeah. Right now, we'll wrap it up there and head over to the RX movement. Awesome.
Cool. Thanks for having me, boss. And we'll chat soon.